Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Fall. Dr. Michael, how are you this evening?
Dr. Barry, I am full of beans this evening, sir. This is number 100 for us, which is kind of a cool milestone.
100.
And we're ushering it in with our favorite fellow. Talking about little Martin Heidegger this evening.
Talking about what possessed us to talk about a Heidegger essay, a kind of snappy one called The Thing, which has nothing to do with the Marvel comic universe, but is about objects. In our more contemporary academic discourse, what he's talking about, The Thing, could be translated into something that I guess it's been around for about 20, 30 years now, object theory or its permutations, network theory. But I'm getting ahead of my story, aren't I?
A bit.
So what we're going to talk about on our 100th episode, happy anniversary of sorts, I guess, Michael.
Sure. Same to you.
We're going to talk about Martin Heidegger's essay, The Thing. I believe this is from 1950. So this is part of the later, just a couple words about Heidegger and Heideggerian thought. But, we're not going to now, of course, it's Heidegger. We're going to get into some weeds. That's unavoidable. But we're going to try not to get lost and tangled in the weeds. So I'm going to try to keep the context to a minimum. The Thing is part of Heidegger's later post-World War II work. So it's about 20 years past, right? A little bit over 20 years past the publication of his big book, Being and Time, where he makes some kind of revolutionary, radical arguments, radical within the context of what he called and criticized the metaphysical tradition in philosophy. And he's making some landmark transformative arguments about the nature of being, about the nature of time. And this is where it kind of morphs into the essays or the essay that we're going to be talking about tonight, the much later essay. He also, in Being in Time, from 20 years earlier, he also was putting forth a new theory of truth. And this new theory of truth, and I think this is kind of relevant, but I'm going to stop the backstory or philosophical context after this, is that rather than connecting truth to something one could observe empirically or making a true perception of reality based on empirical, scientific modes of validation, rather than applying a scientific method or a calculus for determining reality. He uses from the humanities, from the interpretive sciences, from language, from the arts of language. He took the model of the hermeneutic circle, which meant that you enter into a series of spiraling questioning about the nature of reality. And that discourse that kind of assumes you can't stand apart from the reality that you're trying to describe and trying to analyze and interpret, right?
Can you tease that out a little bit?
Well, the hermeneutic circle, what particularly? The hermeneutic circle?
Yeah.
The hermeneutic circle is just like a series of questions and answers. So I'll use Heidegger's bête noire, Descartes, often his sort of antagonist, especially in Being in Time, as a way of doing this. Now, the discourse on method from Descartes is all about achieving final clarity, right? I'm going to tell you what are the things I can't doubt. So it's not about questioning. It's about finding a methodological premise from which, once you found that methodological premise, you can build outwards. And the truth of reality is something you can see and also, importantly, quantify, weigh, and measure. In contrast, taking his cue from the hermeneutical sciences, from the humanities, where, for example, say in biblical criticism, there's not a point of like getting beyond the and biblical criticism would be an example for a lot any kind of textual criticism. You're not trying to get rid of the text.
Right, right,
You're trying to get in, around, you're trying to inhabit the text and see it in different ways. You're not trying to break out to achieve a moment of ultimate clarity and
right,
transcendence, right?
right.
So basically, Heidegger says we're going to have to do that when we think about being and when we think about truth. That if we're going to come up with truth, it's going to be, we can't simply observe it, quantify it, measure it from a safe position outside of being. Rather, we're going to have to um, partake in a circle. We're going to have to, little, weren't you talking about his hippie kumbaya moments? I think the last time we talked about
I was.
Heidegger. I mean, this is his kumbaya
Well, I
moment.
think
He's
the reason I wanted you to tease that out a bit
yeah,
is one, I think that for listeners who aren't deep in the weeds,
deep in the weeds,
we
right?
want here, this is really a bad, like a philosophical version of a dad joke, right? Like we want to get ourselves into the clearing, Barry. We want to be able to,
Ooh,
like what I did there.
that's a Heideggerian
And that's
pun.
terrible. And I think what I wanted
Yeah,
to sort of
yeah.
just clarify or get on the table is that for his purposes here, the notion of truth, one, is not an absolute scientifically measured.
Very important,
It
I
is
think, to say that. Yeah,
this is
yeah.
there this is a what he is searching for, and the ideas that he's playing with, the destinations he's trying to reach, are culturally, humanly relevant and contextual rather than be.
Contextual is a totally important word. He's embedded. Truth is
Yes, thank
something
you. I
embedded.
like that
He's
even better.
embedded
It is
in the field of truth,
He's
right?
looking
Yeah,
at
yeah,
an he's looking for an
right,
unquantifiable essence of things
right.
as opposed to an absolute certainty.
Absolutely.
And I think
Again, the
that's what
contrast with Descartes, right?
right. And that's why I had asked you to clarify. Is just this idea that his quest for truth complicates what we think of when we think of truth as some sort of inflexible absolute. Right. So if we think of, like, gravity is an inflexible absolute, for example,
Right.
that's
A
not
law.
yeah, a
A
law. Thank you.
law.
That's not that's a perfect way. I stumbled us into that, right? He's not looking for the laws of truth. He's looking for the
Very
essence of
much so.
truth.
Very much so. In fact, if we could digress, but we're not, but I'm just going to throw this out there for people maybe who are, are interested in Heidegger and maybe already have some knowledge of Heidegger. There's an interesting passage in Being and Time where he talks about Newton and he talks about the challenge of where he tries actually to redefine the notion of scientific the notion that we discover this idea that we discover laws of nature, that Newton discovered the laws of gravity. He actually wants to kind of rethink that whole language that we use
Mm-hmm.
to talk about scientific discoveries of the truths of nature. We're not going to talk about that now, but for those of us, those of you out there, there got to be somebody out there, right?
All
Somebody
right.
in our earshot who's interested in exploring Heidegger and science. You might want to check that out in Being in Time. Okay. I do think this isn't usually this isn't Barry Falk in his most digressive glory. I think this is kind of important to
Oh
establish
yeah, 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 yeah.
before we get to um, my wretched majesty of digression. I think actually this is an important thing to kind of say at the first
Yeah, no, I'm fine
because
with that.
I think we're gonna make reference to his unique approach to truth as we go through. Let's start with the arresting beginning, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there are a couple mind blow moments in this essay, and two of them happen. One of them happens at the very beginning, and the other near the beginning of the essay. So, and I'm going to read a little bit, and then Dr. Michael, don't pay. Make sure you pay attention. There is a quiz. I'm going to
Love it.
ask you a question.
Love
Well,
it.
now, or rather, I will engage in the hermeneutic circle of questioning with you after I read these two passages. Okay. The thing, all distances in time and space are shrinking. Man now searches overnight by plane, places which formerly took weeks and months to travel. This is why, dear listeners, we're talking about this essay on critical media studies because, and I'll read a little bit more. What you're going to notice is that his starting point, Heidegger's starting point in this essay, is the ways in which technology and media technologies, but any kind of technology, especially the technologies that were developed in the late 19th century, early 20th century, um, the ways in which they have brought us, and this is a typical truism in media studies, right? Like media brings us closer together,
Right.
creates instantaneous
It's
communication.
it's more, it's faster, it's farther, and that's all.
More and faster and farther. So I'll continue reading. All distances in space, time and space are shrinking. Why? Man now reaches overnight by plane, places which formerly took weeks and months of travel. He now receives instant information by radio of events which he formerly learned about only years later, if at all. The germination and growth of plants, which remained hidden throughout the seasons, is now exhibited publicly in a minute. That the short duration is kind of important on film. Distant sites of the most ancient cultures are shown on film as if they stood this very moment amidst today's street traffic. Now, all these changes, of course, have sort of grown into
Intensified. Yeah.
intensified, and they've sort of morphed. These effects remain constant, even though some of the media forms have changed. Now, okay, I said there were mind blow moments after that description. Nonetheless, he like I said, the mind blow moment. He says, "I know you think we've achieved true nearness, true proximity." But then he writes, "Man puts the longest distance behind him in the shortest time now. Yet the frantic abolition of all distances, according to Heidegger, brings no nearness. For nearness does not consist in the shortness of distance. What is least remote from us in point of distance, by virtue of its picture on film or its sound on the radio, can still remain far from us. What is incalculably far from us in point of distance can be next to us. Short distance is not in itself nearness, nor is great distance remoteness." Now I'm going to skip. This is where my question is going to come up, Michael.
Hmm.
So he opens up with this scenario, rosy, seemingly rosy sounding, whatever scenario, positive scenario about what technology has given us. And then he introduces some questions. And then one of the mind blow moments, and I'll stop reading and I want to hear Dr. Rapici's comments. Um, Everything gets lumped together into uniform distancelessness. Now, that's interesting. So, by the second page of the essay, he's saying, what you think, dear reader, as a nearness, a proximate relation to things, two things that's brought on by media, Heidegger would rather refer to and wants to redefine as a uniform distancelessness, i.e., this kind of uniform, standardized thing that is a kind of simulacra, a simulation of nearness, but not true nearness. And the mind blow moment, I'm going to pass it over to Michael. Man stares at what the explosion of the atom bomb could bring with it. Remember, this is written, I believe, in 1950. He's going to return to this essay and do a Heidegger on it and like turn this effing essay into like effing 70 pages of stuff. But I really do like, I don't, he did something of the same with the origin of the work of art. I like the expanded origin of the work of art, but I think the germ of the thing, the germ of the argument that it's best honored, I think, in his first manifestation of the thing,
Mhm.
my opinion. Anyway, man stares at what the explosion of the atom bomb could bring with it. He does not see that the atom bomb and its explosion are the mere final emission of what has long since taken place, has already happened. Do you have glosses? Do you have comments?
I do. I do. Um, I think that first the gloss, then the comment.
Please.
So he's talking about our technological ability to overcome physical distance. And we often, you know, conflate this notion of proximity, nearness in our traditional use of the term, right? Uh, as a physical relationship to things. So he's playing with that word in ways that I think are at the core of this entire discussion,
The
right?
core of the essay.
So,
And kind of core to his method.
but but but
He
but the
loves messing with words that
well,
way.
without yeah, but the
Yeah.
contradiction there, I think the entire
Uh-huh.
gist of the argument that he makes in this essay is wrapped up in this very intentional contradiction around nearness. So what he's saying, as I understand him, is scientifically, we have conquered distance. We have conquered physical separation from things.
Beautiful. Beautifully said.
I can be anywhere in a day. What used to take months to do, I
Beautifully
can be
said.
in a day. I can access all of these things that were never accessible to me beforehand. I have conquered physical distance. But he's saying the problem is that this notion of being of annihilating distance doesn't bring us, in fact, closer to comprehending or understanding or communing with those things that we would seek to understand. And by way of
So good.
explaining this, he goes to the atom bomb, right? And he
So
says,
good.
look, people see the bomb and we're horrified. We're terrified, right? Man stares at the explosion of the bomb and could bring with it. He does not see that the atom bomb and its explosions are the mere final emission of what long since has taken place. It's not that the bomb is the problem. The bomb is not the problem. The bomb is a symptom. The bomb is the moment that marks very clearly, historically, undeniably,
Right.
where we are. The
Right.
problem for Heidegger, I don't think, is the fact that we have created and unleashed this profoundly powerful and terrifying weapon of destruction.
Right.
The problem for Heidegger is that we thought we should, that we thought we could, and then we
Well,
did.
and
It's this
yes, right,
idea. It's
right,
this, and so let me unpack that for a second. It's this idea that, again, technology has overcome distance. Technology has brought us to this powerful weapon, but we aren't neat. How do I want to say this? While we've achieved this proximity to things, this physical ability to do, right? This
mhm,
technological ability
mhm,
to do,
mhm.
we aren't in connection. We aren't I don't know how to say this, Barry. You're going to have to help me. We are not contextually close to the things. We don't have a sense of nearness. There's no real understand. As I understand this, there's we're we've lost the forest for we've lost the trees for the
Yeah.
forest here.
Well, let me think with your, if I can, I'm just going to sort of
Yeah,
enter the Repeaty hermeneutic
that's
circle because
that's
you're, and you tell me whether I'm inhabiting it, well or
So
poorly, but
Heidegger's one of Heidegger's
yeah.
concerns, right,
Mhm.
is man's domination over nature. We've talked about this
Indeed.
before,
Right. Indeed.
okay? And the problem, the domination that
Hmm.
results, the physical manifestation of these dominations, right? So the dam that
Hmm.
harnesses energy, the bomb
Hmm.
that releases this
Right.
profound,
Right.
terror, right? These are the physical manifestations of our need to dominate, our impulse to
Indeed.
dominate. And science has become the vehicle through which we do this. And his problem,
Right.
as we talked about, we hinted at the beginning, right? We've let scientific thought, scientific reasoning has removed us from our ontological connection to things. We're asking the wrong questions, we're looking at the wrong
That's
things.
it. That's it.
And so when we have something like the bomb, we have an achievement without a connection in a way. This is science without, I don't want to say without reason because he doesn't say that. It's a different kind of
Well,
reason.
it's an instrumental reason where the rationale for the technology has sort of replaced everything. I think you answered your question very well when you're in your last in your last discourse thread, not
Right.
digression, but your last discourse thread. Something I was thinking about the atom bomb, trying to put the atom bomb together with the annihilation, say, of time and space that's affected by film. When you think about film or the plane, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
these are ways of annihilating distance.
Mm-hmm.
And it occurs to me that one of the reasons why he can sort of pick on the atom bomb as the highest achievement of alienation is because with the atom bomb, so in a way, planes are great because they get me to go where I want to go, even though the distance is unimaginably long. I can traverse it in a short time. Planes help me annihilate distance. The internet helps me annihilate the distance for, in our case, the distance, the very real distance from Tallahassee and Tampa and St. Pete, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, these technologies are about annihilation of certain things. The atom bomb is just about annihilation.
Yeah.
Just about, but annihilation was part of all these other technologies that he mentioned, even the more benign technologies. So in a way, that's another way in which,
So
uh,
let me ask you a
yeah,
question
right,
about this. It seems to me that another like I think it might be helpful to come up with a proxy for annihilation, right? Because
yeah,
annihilation
elimination,
well, how about something a little more friendly? How about the overcoming, right? We
overcoming.
we
Sure, sure,
overcome distance.
sure.
We overcome time, and we may have just overcome humanity, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. No, all right. That
And
sure.
the reason I think it's important to do that is because again, all of these air quote achievements, okay, and they are achievements. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that these aren't, impressive achievements in history, but they are all viewed, and I think this is one of his real critiques here, which is interesting. They're all viewed through what has become the dominant lens, which is scientific thinking and the primacy of science. And we see this today. I mean, this is still very much happening. We have to get everybody into STEM and nobody can figure out what the use of a liberal arts degree is, right?
Mhm.
That his argument is that this is all just so we have overcome these obstacles um, via the scientific lens and the scientific thinking, which is calculating, it's measurable, it is the absolute of Descartes, right? The laws of physics dictate that these things are truths, and that when we seek these truths, this is what we get. We get the annihilation or the overcoming of things.
So that's exactly it. Science is the problem, not science,
The
not
dominant,
science
the
per se,
dominant position of
but the
science.
idea of scientific instrumental rationality,
That's good.
process through science and technology. That's kind of the problem, and its aims and goals overtaking truth, and also very relevant to this essay. Um, uh, Also intruding on our relationship to the world. And one of the things the world consists of, besides ourselves, are things. So hence this essay, and hence the necessity in Heidegger's. So as a kind of counter to the atom bomb,
Hmm.
Heidegger, not so modestly, says, well, if that's bad nearness, if our society, our culture, our science is dominated by this really toxic idea of nearness that is not nearness, but uniform distancelessness.
And that's
And
that's the distinction he makes, right?
that's
On
the
one
distinction he
hand,
makes.
science has given us distancenessless. The other side of the coin that he's saying we
Perfect.
should be
Yes.
striving for is what he is calling nearness. Okay.
And to get to nearness, he wants to, in the German romantic hippie tradition that we've already been talking about, he is going to find in a homely domestic object, a Heimlich, a homely, uh, familiar domestic, and he's going to meditate on this familiar object as a way to constitute, he hopes, in the conceptual realm, in a way to better understand nearness. And it's a counter, as you were saying, to uniform distancelessness, which he feels, which he's arguing, has been arguing here at the beginning of the essay, has sort of infiltrated our understanding of proximation, of close, of nearness. And nearness, uh, let me say that. So let me say this before I read, I think, a relevant passage. You know, if you have a false idea of nearness, what that means is that you are not able to have intimate relations with others, with objects in your world, right? I mean, there's a lot hanging on nearness because I think one translation or one meaning of nearness really is like intimacy, familiar relations with the world. Like it's possible, Heidegger thinks, for us to live in the world and exist as strangers in the world. I think that's kind of the existential cost of not really being near, of having a bad idea of nearness. So he wants to rethink or create an opening, create a clearing, to use his other term, where a new notion of nearness can emerge or reemerge. And so I'll turn to the text here. What about nearness? How can we come to know its nature? So it's sort of implied that what he's been talking about previously and what we've been talking about, we're not going to know the nature of nearness from that. Nearness, it seems, cannot be encountered directly. We succeed in reaching it rather by attending to what is near. We succeed in reaching it rather by attending to what is near. Next to us are what we usually call things. So now we got to the real purpose of the essay. But what is a thing? Man has so far given no more thought to the thing as a thing than he has to nearness.
So
So,
this
hence
is
the importance of this essay, right? That in order to think about nearness, we're going to have to think about the thing. And he throws down this challenge that we haven't started thinking about things properly yet. And he's going to move to a domestic, a homely object, the jug, in order to come to terms with a thing, which is a preliminary, according to Heidegger, the necessary preliminary act to better understanding nearness.
so I think this is probably not a terrible place to step back so as to not have a Heideggerian overload. But I think before we step back, I want to just take a couple seconds to tease out what he's done here, okay? Because it's critical, it's central to understanding the argument that he's making. So let me talk with you about this for a second. So he's talking about nearness as the counter to distancelessness. right?
Right. Right.
And he's saying nearness, it cannot be encountered directly. So this is not something that this is not a physical relation. And he says this in the introduction, right? But you can't just walk up to something and be near to it in the sense that he is considering here. He says we succeed in reaching it rather by attending to what is near. And that what is near is again not proximate to us. It is attending to it is sort of like a meditation upon. It is a reflection upon something. It is not, I feel, this scientifically driven domination of things.
Domination is, I think, the total right word to use, right?
Right.
And I think in this essay, and maybe we'll want to question it, later on, but he comes pretty close to saying that the scientific method, as usually applied, is kind of a way is pretty much the same thing as dominate, as the exercise of domination over
Yes.
nature,
And
right?
and I think implicit in that statement is the argument that you cannot be near to something
Indeed.
if you are in the process of dominating it,
Right.
because
Right.
domination is not reflection. And the problem that we have,
Exactly. Exactly.
the problem that we
Exactly.
have is that our default is set to dominate. So just to clear up a couple terms so that we can sort of, exit with our heads held high here, right? We succeed in reaching it rather by attending to what is near. Near to us are what we usually call things. But what is a thing? And this is the sense. I mean, this was so. I'm just gonna say this was trippy to work through the first time I read it. Right? Is he makes the distinction, and I think that it's helpful to think of this distinction in terms of his issue with scientific quantification,
Absolutely.
domination. Right?
Right.
He
Right.
makes this distinction between things and objects.
Indeed.
Scientific thinking yields objects. It yields, I'm going to, you have to choose my words carefully here. It yields items to be dominated, which are then objectified because they serve specific purposes and are used in pursuit of a specific purpose. Things, on the other hand, are distinct from what he is calling objects. And this is a mode, correct me if I'm wrong, but the difference between something's thingliness and something's objectification
Oh, absolutely.
is a mode
Yes.
of classification of seeing. It is a
Right.
relationship
Right.
that is connected to the degree of nearness that we have to it.
Right. Nearness is an antidote to thingification, to
Well,
objectification,
no,
to reification. Huh?
did you mean to use the word thingification in there? That would seem.
Well, I mean, not in his sense, but
Yes.
I mean,
Okay.
I meant, and I guess yes, to keep the terms clear, I would say that um, nearness is a way of overcoming objectification. Yeah,
Yes, yes. And so that's the distinction he's playing with is this
right,
this this idea of on one hand the thing which is independent
right,
and on the other hand this object which has been subjectified by our tendencies to
absolutely.
dominate.
And by our conceptual grids, science is a
Yes,
conceptual
yes,
grid, but
yes,
there are
yes,
other
yes.
conceptual grids that turn objects into things,
Right,
that
but
turn the outside world or reality itself
but
into a thing, right?
all of those grids
Mhm.
are rooted in this tendency to dominate. It is the
That's his
tendency.
argument.
It is
That's
the
his argument
tendency to
against the
objectify.
metaphysical, and that's his argument not only against science, but against the metaphysical tradition to core.
Yes.
Um, I think this is a good place to. So, Michael, here's what I think we did here on our 100th episode. What I think we did is we kind of started engaging uh, we engaged Heidegger's essay, The Thing. And what we tried to do in the last half hour or so is set up the I guess the bad present, the bad ideas, the ideas that Heidegger himself wants to counter, right? Like, we have a conceptual problem here, and a lot of bad things are at the root of this conceptual problem, or this bad conceptual grid we've imposed on the world. And he is going to try to, and we're going to talk about this more. We're going to talk about Heidegger's proposed better way of thinking about things, that I think he feels is going to lead to, I really want to say this. I think he feels that this is a way of, enlightenment. This is the way of true enlightenment. He would hate that term, but this is a way of true enlightenment, to think about, to have a less alienated relation to the world.
I
That's
like
kind of at stake on that, right?
I like the way you said that, and I think that's right. It is about communing, connecting. It is about
Yes.
trying to overcome this sense of alienation that
That's it. That's it.
our way of being, or no, it's still current, way of being has
Right.
produced. So
No, that's exactly it. What I was trying to say, I can say it more concisely. What I was trying clumsily to say is that there's a therapeutic aim
yes,
to this essay. And
yes,
that's
yes.
where we're going to try to unpack in part two of the thing, where we talk about his therapy for overcoming these bad ways of thinking about things.
All right. Well, Barry, happy 100. I think it's only fitting that 101 is still Heidegger. So this is what we'll do. Yeah. So next time we will very, very clearly pick up from here with the discussion of the jug
Sure.
and how
Yeah.
that goes. All right.
And I should say, as a teaser, in episode two, or episode 101, part two of the thing, we're going to analyze deathless sentences like
Oh,
Doug.
no grown men should be saying using the language that he's talking about. Yeah. All right, Barry, thank you so much. A
All right.
scintillating discussion.
All right, Michael. Thanks again. Happy 100.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to the Critical Media Studies podcast. To find out more about the show, check out our webpage at criticalmediastudiespodcast.com.